Levi Gundert.
Hey.
Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much. It's great to be here.
It's nice to have you here, coming at us live from sunny San Diego, California.
It is sunny today. Yeah, we had a little rain over the weekend.
Nice.
It was a big deal.
Well, that's probably great for you guys, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is.
It's the first in a long time. But hey, Senior Vice President of Global Intelligence in Recorded Future. That is not the title that I would expect to be talking about cyber insurance with, though.
Yeah, it's interesting. So much of what we do at Recorded Future, we touch so many different parts of security within sort of organizations, and a lot of it at their strategic level, becomes about resilience, and that's sort of how insurance plays into this. Is it's become a major tool for so many companies, and that's sort of what led me down the path here a little bit.
What else? Obviously, Recorded Future is like a household name in threat intelligence and always has been. But for those of the listeners that haven't heard of Recorded Future, why don't you give us a quick intro to both to yourself and what Recorded Future has got you doing over there?
Yeah, absolutely. So Recorded Future is a SaaS company. So what was really compelling for me in the early days was it was threat intelligence that was always product focused from the very beginning. So there's a lot of services companies out there, but Recorded Future built a really unique platform and a really unique product. And we have a lot of different verticals that we apply intelligence to. So everything from physical security to security operations, threat intelligence itself, brand, identity, vulnerability management, third-party risk, financial fraud, attack surface management, and so forth. So it's been quite a journey. I started my career in law enforcement with the U.S. Secret Service.
Oh.
Yeah, I used to work cybercrime cases out of the LA field office. And I've jumped around the private sector a little bit since then, but I've been with Recorded Future almost 7 years now. And it's really been a rocket ship. It's been unbelievable to be a part of. Really a great adventure.
That's awesome. What made you think about writing this paper? A new cyber insurance model, continuous control validation. What was like the pushed you to do that?
Yeah, so it was interesting. It was a part of some work I was doing at Indiana University, and I realized that there was some great crossover into my day-to-day work. So a lot of what I do is sort of consulting with CISOs across our various clients, and we spend a lot of time talking about the priorities that are most important and what the challenges that are most important for CISOs right now. And a lot of the topics that are really near and dear to my heart are really around risk quantification, which is how do CISOs begin to tell a better story to the board of directors and other executives about their investments in security and what that's doing for the business. And I've spent many years actually researching this with our chief data scientist internally, Dr. Bill Ladd, and we've done a lot of work around what makes sense in terms of quantifying risk versus qualifying risk. And when you do that and you start to tell a more compelling story for the board where they can understand security inside of that lens of risk becomes this sort of all-encompassing topic. And part of it, in addressing it, obviously cyber insurance becomes really important. And it's interesting, when you talk to our clients, they start telling me, hey, it's becoming really difficult to renew our policies at the same level that, if we had $100 million in aggregate policy protection, now we're having to go to 10 different providers, right, to get that done. Our premiums are going up by 50%. A lot of insurers are exiting the market. A lot of insurers are hemorrhaging money on these policies. Property and casualty are, some of the bigger ones around cyber. So that's really, from a sheer curiosity point of view, I really dug into this and thought, this is a really interesting space in terms of what's happening in that market specifically right now.
In your experience, do CISOs usually get involved in a cyber insurance sort of deal, or is that like being handled by risk or some other division?
Yeah, they're usually involved. It depends on the size of the company, honestly. If it's a massive enterprise, they're not usually the ones that are the economic buyer for the policy. It's usually, someone in GRC, governance, risk compliance, that sort of thing. But they're usually sort of adjacent, right? As an adjacent stakeholder.
They get dragged into it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Would you, in your experience, do you see them like not liking it, or like they'd rather have that money to spend on their own defensive or their own strategy than to give it to somebody else? And
No, I think
like,
the most provocative question here is, if you've done your due diligence on the compliance side and you're passing your audits, both external and internal audits, and you have a good cyber insurance policy, why would you spend more on security? Truly, right?
that's
So
a good,
if
it's a
you,
great
yeah,
question. Yeah.
and this is a real, and I ask this question all the time to CSOs when I do CSO presentations at conferences and so forth. I ask the question, sort of, as the Brits say, a little bit cheeky, I should say. It's a little bit cheeky, a little bit provocative here. But I'm honest when I ask the question, because I think board of directors are now at the point where they say, we are spending an enormous amount on security. Where does it end, right? And where's the point of diminishing returns? Because we obviously can't take risk to zero, nor do we want to try to take risk to zero. So, at what point are we comfortable with residual risk? And those cyber insurance policies are really handy tools to help them do that, to say, look, we have satisfied our obligations under GDPR, under all of the various frameworks that may govern our industry, and we have a good policy. So basically, we could call it a day. Now, I would argue there's a lot of operational risk that still remains. So if you do a Venn diagram here, you really sort of need the view into, governance compliance risk, and then the overlapping circle, is your residual operational risk, which is, what are those events, not Petya style, that can really knock out your operations and cause financial loss in a way that you're not really accounting for on the governance and risk compliance side. And that's because, most of those penalties you can understand. You understand penalties under GDPR, you understand penalties under California's privacy law, you understand if you mess up on Sarbanes-Oxley, right? Or the FTC comes after you for false advertising around security. You sort of understand what some of those costs could be, right? You got to pay for credit monitoring. You may have some punitive fines associated with it, but it's much harder to understand the other side of that circle, which is, what will it cost our business if we have an operational outage? And that's where most companies today are falling back on that cyber insurance policy and going, yes, the losses could be substantial. That's why we have a policy. The problem, of course, is that as we're learning, right, with Mondelez and we're Merck and some of these other cases, right, that it can take years to litigate. The insurance companies are now tightening up their policy language, right, and they do not want to be on the hook for anything that could be a major financial loss stemming from, a cyber event.
So they're basically using their big words to like write themselves away from that sort of responsibility, right? Because like if I remember correctly, the Musk and the Mondelez one, that they're still ongoing because they're saying that was an act of war or something.
That's right. That's right. So that's
yeah.
right. The insurer is saying it's an act of war, and therefore it's a policy exclusion. But where the insured is saying, no, this was not an act of war, and it is covered. Right, so that case that just got settled in New Jersey is huge, where they sided with the insured, and the insurer's on the hook for billions of dollars. Right, so now Lloyd's of London and others have already come out and said, look, you have to tighten up your policy language. You have to tighten up all the exclusions. You have to be very articulate about what you're going to cover on cyber and what you're not. And I think the main catalyst for picking up these policies really in the last 5 years has been ransomware, right? And that's the big threat that everyone has been super worried about. And again, everyone loves the word resilience. It's like, well, we got to be resilient. Well, insurance is, one of those tools and one of those layers in being resilient, but it's not going to be the same tool. It's not going to have the same efficacy going forward as it once had, because the insurance industry is hemorrhaging cash right now.
One thing you wrote about in your paper here is that like there's a mismatch between the insurance people that are providing the insurance and their ability to actually understand. I'm not going to say they don't know what they're talking about, but it's I'm struggling to know what I'm talking about because everything's changing all the time. So how could you expect somebody that's actually seen finance major to keep up with all that? You want to elaborate on that point a little bit? Like, what do you think around that?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's I think in terms of causation here for these losses, there's two main points. So number one is, actuaries love actuarial tables. right? And that's how you end up with pricing on a life insurance policy. That's how you end up with your, home and auto insurance, right? And they love those things. When it comes to cyber, you don't have perfect data to create actuarial tables yet, right? There's a lot of events, but not nearly as many as you see in other lines of business. So that's number one. And number two, if you're an underwriter, you either need to be fairly technical or you need to be working with someone who's fairly technical to actually understand what's happening inside of an enterprise. And as you said, enterprises are extremely complex places. There is a lot of complexity in the technology environment when you think about cloud, when you think about digital transformation, all the things that are going on. You overlay security on any given day. It's extremely complex. So unfortunately, what started here was you had underwriters that would basically send a questionnaire out to the potential insured and say, are you doing these things? And they would take the attestation of those things and go, okay, they attest they're doing all these things. We're going to underwrite the policy. Right. And so what I'm advocating in the paper is that you really have to rethink how you underwrite these policies, and you really have to come at it from this continuous control validation perspective, which is we need telematics, we need telemetry from inside of the insured, and we need to partner with them on, getting the data, acquiring the data, interpreting the data on it, and then on an ongoing basis, being able to understand, the latest threats. How do the controls inside these companies, how do they stack up? And that's not a once a quarter exercise. That's a daily exercise. That's not a, hey, we did a pen test. We attest, we did the pen test last quarter. Here's the summary results. Here's the findings. That's great. But tomorrow's a new day, right? Tomorrow, 10 people will open source new attack tools that'll get picked up by bad actors all over the world. And they'll be used in attacks weeks and months later. Do you have gaps in your controls? Yeah, everyone does. So it's not just are they going to get in, right? Of course, everyone's going to get in at some point. It's not just initial unauthorized access. It's what happens once they're in, and how long does it take you to detect them once they're in, and how much damage can they do once they're in. So it's multiple things. But you look at an auto policy, everybody wants telematics from the car on an ongoing basis. How fast are you going? Is your driving erratic, right? And so they're going to give you lower premiums if you're able to give them ongoing telematics. It's the same thing in cyber. You can't have underwriters that are just sort of relying on attestations and they don't understand the technical minutia behind how security is actually implemented, because it's the cracks that get exploited. So you just have to understand, and no one's going to be perfect. You just need to understand where the cracks are and what it's likely to result in down the line.
Yeah, I like what the quote you had from Warren Buffett. Frankly, I don't think we or anybody else really knows what they're doing when writing cyber. People who say they have a firm grasp on the risk are kidding themselves.
Yeah, that's my favorite quote.
And I
that's
guess
my favorite quote of all time.
Yeah, it's really good. It's really good. And a lot of people. So if it continues down this path, basically, there's not going to be any cyber insurance left, right? And that's kind of like the road we're going down. And many may think like, okay, well, fine, then companies just don't buy cyber insurance, whatever. Like, okay, I'll go buy something else. But that's not. You had a point in there too. That's not good for us as citizens, as taxpayers. That's not a good situation, right? That's interesting.
Yeah, 100%. It is in the public interest to have a vibrant and thriving insurance market. If you look at if you look at trying to obtain flood insurance in Florida, or fire insurance in California in certain parts of the state, right? It's very difficult, and the state becomes the insurer of last resort, and that's not really ideal. So I think, given the smorgasbord of threats and risks that a company has to contend with, we want a vibrant and thriving insurance marketplace. And so you see New York State came out and said, these are some of the principles and some of the guidelines. If you're going to underwrite policies, you should be thinking about, these very specific topics, and you should be able to address these very specific topics. So that's the sort of thing, kudos to New York State for coming out and doing that. But I think, we need more of that. And we also just need a lot more technical expertise within these insurance underwriters, right? Because like you said, if the policies get to the point where they're excluding so much that it doesn't make it worth it to have the policy anymore, then there's just one less tool in the tool bag for the CISOs that are already engaged in a very difficult job.
I'm sure they'd be totally fine with one less meeting with with vendors. And also like over to control validation. By the way, are you guys in the control validation business? Do you have software that validates controls?
So we are the gasoline for a control validation engine. So if you think about automated control validation, cool. Like an attack IQ platform, we are really the gasoline that powers it.
Because you see what's going on out there, basically.
Exactly. So if you look at adversary TTPs, if you look at the tools and the tactics, our platform is collecting those and able to push those, in an API format into those types of engines for control validation.
Yeah. The reason I asked is because I had Mandiant on the podcast before, Brian Contos from there. It was called Veridin before.
Yep.
And I mean that idea, when I saw the title of the paper, I was like, oh, super interesting. That makes total sense, right? Okay, cool. You want insurance? Fine. You have to have something like this, and you have to show us everything.
Yeah.
But I mean, getting that, there's one thing I really thought was interesting in that. You wrote that if we go down that path, then insurance companies are becoming like, I'm not sure how much you know about Mnemonic. We're a cybersecurity partner, right? We work with a bunch of different vendors and whatnot. But wouldn't then a cyber underwriter then become like a partner if you're actually that deep in an enterprise's security, right? Then at the end of the day, then you're sitting at the same table as I am as a vendor for a partner for that client, right?
Absolutely, and I think that's really where insurance companies need to think about how they present themselves to the insured, that they want to be partnering, because it's in both of their best interests to do that. It's not just hey, we're going to check in once a year, once a quarter. It really needs to be an ongoing partnership, and not just hey, we found a crack and now we're going to penalize you for it. It really needs to be hey, we have these tools at our disposal as the insurance company, and we can help you, right, as a partner to be more resilient, to improve your security, to reduce your risk, and we both win in the end.
I mean, I see the point. I really like it. I just kind of see like, in reality, what would have to happen then? And there's no right answer to this, right? I guess insurance companies have to start buying cyber insurance companies just to get that competency in house and be able to have those, conversations and relationships. Because I don't know how it is. I mean, in the States it's much different than Norway, but like, I see I can see like insurance agents, they come in suits, right? The security department's not wearing a suit, right? Yeah. So it might be a little mismatch there. I'm not sure how that would work in practice. But
so I think it's the underwriters, right? It's the underwriters that really need that technical know-how, or at least a partner that's riding shotgun with them, right? So it's fine to sell these policies, but doing the due diligence requires a lot more technical foundations.
And I mean, I should have asked my friend this, but like a typical sales cycle for cyber insurance. I mean, you had it in your thing, in your paper. It said the process of getting cyber insurance, at least back in the day, was like gathering information regarding their program through surveys and interviews, including corporate governance and controls, vulnerability management, access controls, encryption, endpoint monitoring, boundary defenses. That's like something that my consultants would use like 2 or 3 months on, And like, I'm not sure if that's in the bounds of a normal like sales cycle for cyber insurance, but maybe it is. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it is now.
Large company,
yeah, I think those engagements are being stretched now as underwriters understand they have to proceed with caution.
Interesting. And I mean, you talked about the telemetry based analytics. What want to go into more detail about that? That's like
so telemetry at the end of the day is just data. Right, that's what telemetry is, but you need different types of data, and you need it from different types of sources. So, you need, for example, maybe you need Active Directory telemetry in terms of what sort of number of authentication events are you seeing in a typical day, and then when it comes to identity. Is the company actually doing any sort of due diligence on collecting stolen credentials that are out there in the wild, right? And being able to proactively disable those accounts, reset those accounts before they get used in terms of credential reuse, on vulnerability management, right? Or what is the what is the average time to patch, specifically on vulnerabilities that have remote code execution potential. And again, these are not, so it's changing the model from someone's attesting to the fact they're doing it to let's actually see the data, right? And
right now,
let's see the data today in real time and what that looks like. And really you want to do that across the board, in all those different security silos, because it's obviously not just one. If you're looking at ransomware and you're worried about ransomware, obviously the initial unauthorized access, we see it primarily happening through credential reuse, vulnerabilities, and phishing, right? So same thing with phishing. Let's see what, the data looks like on phishing. Well, what is the daily inbound email flow? How many are getting quarantined? What do the phishing tests look like, right? And of course, it's in the company's interest to want to hide some of that just by nature. But I think that's, again, where the insurance company has to be assuring them that they want a partner, right? And that they can't underwrite a policy without really understanding the organization first. So I think telemetry is probably scary. And of course, there's certainly some privacy concerns, but most of this telemetry can be obtained, without violating PII or PHI or, any of the detailed data around customer records. It's really about how are security controls functioning on a day-to-day basis.
Can you see, now I'm like way out there, but can you see like a situation where like maybe like an underwriter will say, okay, you have to use this service. And I'm not going to say like an underwriter is going to provide a SOC service, but what if they said you have to use this SOC service from this provider according to these, whatever. So they kind of like give away the whole PII discussion like that gets taken care of by some trusted party already. Can you see that happening?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're already doing it, right? When these policies are being invoked around ransomware, the insurance companies already have companies on retainer for forensics. They have companies on retainer to negotiate ransoms, right? And to try and drive down the price of the ransom and so forth. So, no, I think that's very reasonable. And again, it's about the quality and the efficacy of the control, not just that you have a control. So you can say, do you have a 24/7 security operations center? Yes or no. That doesn't matter. What matters is how strong are the people that work inside that security operations center? And, what is the overall efficacy of that control? What kind of people work there? How long have they been there? What is their background? And that's really what you have to dive into. So that's really the difference, kind of what we're talking about here.
I actually literally have seen that on a questionnaire. Do you have a 24/7 SOC? And there was nothing else. There was no like, what are you monitoring? No log source information.
Exactly.
It was like, are you monitoring network traffic? It was just like yes or no.
And this,
it was interesting though, because if you wrote yes and then you didn't actually have, or if whatever you answer on those things, if you answer wrong or at the time of the attack that whatever you said yes to maybe it was true then, but it wasn't true then, you don't get anything. That's just off the table.
Yeah. And so it's backwards. The solution is backwards. And this is actually a bigger problem with frameworks. So, I'll ask CISO sometimes, what is the goal of the security program? They say, well, we want to increase maturity from a 3 to a 4 in, the NIST cybersecurity framework or CMMI or whatever the framework is. The problem with the frameworks is that they don't update frequently enough. So they update maybe every 18 months, every 24 months. That's number one. And number two is people just end up in this check the box mentality of, well, we're going to check this box and move on. And that's going to help us increase our maturity score with no regard to the quality of the implementation. And everything in security is about the quality of the implementation. It's not about, did you check the box or not? And that's the problem with these frameworks, right? The goal should be to be reducing risk in a measurable way that you can communicate, not just checking the box. And that's the same deal here with underwriting insurance policies.
Yeah, it becomes like a religion, right? That everybody just does because that's all we have to do. Yeah. What do you see as recorded futures role, or like a threat intelligence in general? I guess I'll just say, how can that? Because in your paper, you said it earlier too. Phishing test results, right? You're measuring certain things because you think that those measures or have like that's where the threats are coming from, and you keep that constantly sort of updated. That's where you see your role is, or.
No, I think threat intelligence plays a massively important role here across a ton of different verticals. So like I said, On the identity piece, are you identifying and obtaining stolen credentials that are out there in the wild, right? They come from stolen databases. They come from bad actors running different types of malware that collect everything on a victim's machine. Then they aggregate and sell those, right? Are you going out, identifying, collecting those, comparing it against your active user list, and then proactively resetting accounts, right? If you're doing that as a process, as part of your security process, you're in a much better place in terms of iteratively reducing risk than a company that's not doing that, right? But that's a threat intelligence function. Are you looking at vulnerabilities that are actively being exploited in the wild, and increasing the urgency with which you patch those particular vulnerabilities where there is active exploitation evidence, even before sometimes there's a CVSS score for it, or it's even an NVD. Oftentimes, threat intelligence, we see these things happening before, right? Those scoring events happen. Right? Are you doing that? Are you doing those things? Are you looking at new tools and tactics? They're happening daily, just in open source, not even in the criminal forms. Just looking at the tools that people release as quote unquote red teaming tools get picked up by adversaries on a daily basis. Are you using those same tools and measuring the efficacy of your controls, whether it be host-based, whether it be network-based? But are you doing that, right? We have across our client portfolio, we have a broad spectrum of maturity. We have clients that are just starting their journey with intelligence and some that are in the far end of maturity with it. And I'd say, that's one of those sort of far end maturity activities. But if you're doing that in an iterative basis, like some of our clients are, you are managing risk in an entirely different way than companies that aren't able to do that.
It just made me realize is most companies just go out and say, hey, I need a CM tool or I need this tool. And then, I agree. Like, yeah, you should have that. But if I had to prioritize my money and where I'd be spending, I would do I don't think that a lot of companies are doing that. I'm not sure it's because of lack of understanding or lack of resources or obviously both. But yeah, that's definitely what they should be doing, right? If it's happening, you use the example of something being exploited out in the wild. If that's being exploited in the wild, you should definitely be testing, right?
Yeah.
But I guess it's just a lack of general knowledge, I guess.
Yeah, and the tools themselves, we see Cobalt Strike used in so many successful attacks, but there's other tools that are open source that are used all the time. And some of our clients are very good at this process, and they go back to their AV vendor or their EDR vendor, and they say, hey, you have a gap in coverage here. We don't have a definition or a heuristic for this particular tool that got open source 2 weeks ago. You have to fix that, right? You have to update it. And that whole process, right, puts you in a whole different level of maturity in terms of risk management. And there's so many of these, right? What are you doing on third-party risk, right? Are you looking at your tier one vendor suppliers? Are you looking at where they're breached, right? Everyone has outdated certificates. Everyone has, some level of interest in the quote unquote dark web. But do you have an intelligence source that can tell you when one of your tier one vendors has a material breach, right? Or they're seeing traffic, right, from that company to a known command and control server on the internet? That's bad, right? And most companies want to sever access to that tier one vendor supplier and then hopefully go help them remediate, figure out what the issue is and help them remediate it, right? As an organization, are you doing that, right? And as an insurer, you need to know that, right? Because again, that's a really powerful intelligence workflow. If you're not doing it, it puts you in a different category of risk as an insurer looking at that, right? So there's so many different verticals you can apply intelligence to. Do you have another example? But are you looking for proprietary code in places like GitHub, right? We've had clients, developers weren't doing it maliciously, but they just wanted to work on code when they got home. So they backed up their entire hard drive to a public GitHub repo. They'd go home, they'd check it out, they'd work on some code, they'd recheck it in, they'd go back to work the next day, and they'd continue the cycle. It wasn't even, a private repo. It's literally the entire contents of the hard drive getting backed up to a public repo overnight. As an insurer, you look at that and go, yeah, that's definitely something, right, that we want our insured companies to be doing as a process, right?
Yeah.
There's so many examples of how intelligence supercharges security And that's where I think there's a lot of potential, again, for insurers to help their prospective clients understand how to do some of these workflows just better.
How far away? I mean, I agree with everything that you've. Very good paper, by the way, and really interesting.
Thank you.
Also, is illuminating. How far away are we from this actually being a reality? Because I mean, I would be very surprised if this obviously didn't happen now, because it makes total sense, and it will help get the CISO where he needs to be in terms of speaking business. Finally.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I think financial services leads the way in so many things. If you look at where intelligence really became a formalized program, it was in financial services. Outside of the public sector, they have far and away been out in front, and they have a lot of incentive, obviously, to do security well, to manage risk well, and they've really done some great things around intelligence. So I think as financial services companies sort of set the pace, working with insurers, I think you'll start to see trickle-down effects in other industry verticals over time. But you're probably talking about a multi-year process here, and I don't expect it to happen overnight. But I hope that it happens quick enough that there's still a critical mass of insurers out there offering cyber policies.
So hey, last little sales pitch for you guys. What can you help with on this journey for a client that wants to get into this whole control validation thing, not only for cyber insurance but just for the good of their company?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as I said, we have 10 modules, 10 verticals that we apply intelligence to, and it's really having a conversation about your journey and where you are and where you want to be, and how intelligence can help inform that risk-based program. And as I said, some of our clients, they start with identity and brand. They work their way into, security operations and vulnerability management, third-party risk, and eventually, they get to more of the control validation work. But, we recognize it is a journey and it is a process. And part of the fun, I think, for me is being able to partner with different companies at different sizes and help them along in that journey. I get out of bed in the morning to help our clients reduce risk. Sometimes it's in little ways, and sometimes it's in big ways, but it's a lot of fun.
It is really fun. Well, Levi, thank you so much for your time. It's been super interesting, and I would not be surprised. Right after this, I'm going to have a chat with you about your next episode with us, because I have a good idea already.
Excellent. This was a lot of fun, Robbie. Thanks so much. I appreciate the opportunity.